So if we look at, as I say, Earth is the bottom level, which is beta. And then you have water, which is alpha. And then you have air, which is theta. Then you have fire, which is delta. Then you have enlightenment, nirvana, or however. Here's the problem. If everybody is always in the first level of consciousness, now in modern science you have beta, alpha, theta, delta, brain cycles. They can translate to your level of consciousness. So if you're in beta and you read the Bible, you will only see it through the perception of beta eyes, of the bottom level of consciousness. You will see it via that perception. Not a bad thing, but you will not see it on the next level, alpha, until you alter your state of consciousness. Now, if you are not a disciplined Christian and you do not fast and you do not do as Jesus told you to do, then you are not going to be able to see the next depths of the Bible. And thus, as Jesus told you, he speaks in parable for a reason. There are allegories, and it says some things are allegories in the Bible. It physically says that. And if you don't pause and ask yourself, what is this allegorical meaning? What is this parabolic meaning? What is this story that makes no sense inside the reality that I live in? And meditate on it and get deep within it and fast, etc., to understand it, then you're not going to raise up to the next level of consciousness, and you're not going to be able to perceive the next layer of the Bible. The next layer being the alpha state. Now, inside the Bible, there's a code from Greek mysticism, which is a documented language and way of representing this, of the stages of human consciousness. And the first stage in Greek mysticism is earth. The second stage is water. The third is air. The fourth is fire. Earth, water, air, fire, and then the final product is quintessence, or the new mind. Nirvana, enlightenment, union and oneness with the Creator.
Heaven's always close to end, for he has seen too much hatred. Only weapon that he chooses is love, universal call, now for justice.
Hey guys, so I want to talk about consciousness, and more specifically I want to talk about consciousness and how it's not mentioned in the Bible on the literal sense. There's no talk and description of consciousness or altering consciousness. There are instructions in there that hint at the idea you can. There are instructions regarding Daniel, who alters the diet of certain persons, which can indeed alter your consciousness. There are instructions that tell you to fast, which in turn will force you to alter your state of consciousness. But there's no description of consciousness, and herein I find a problem, because the state of consciousness of a human being is vastly important depending upon what they are doing. Now, the reason I want to talk on this topic was stirred in me because a few weeks ago a friend of mine, whilst I was sick, said to me, I've just been reading about Krishna and how they were with the Brahman and had to return to their body because it was dying, it was getting sick, but their consciousness had disconnected and was with God. Now, with lots of fasting and meditation, and also in my instance, I find by eating a very well combined, easy to digest diet and a non-heavy diet and a plant-based diet, that I can alter my state of consciousness quite well. To the degree, with enough meditation, it's as if it's like normal everyday life, but a few inches outside of your body. And that's the best way I would be able to describe it. Now, this helps someone like myself immeasurably. You can hear in the background, I have a child crying there, but they're not alone. They have the care workers with them. But I'm living at home, and there are 28 special needs children, all with varied problems, all getting sick. I have the rescue dogs, I have the children in the community, I have thousands of people coming to this place every week, every month we should say, or every year, however you want to put it, it's not thousands a week, asking for help and assistance. We have thousands of children on a list waiting for help and assistance who are child labouring, etc. All of this can be very stressful for a human being, and I know that if I was constantly grounded in my body, I wouldn't be able to do this. Now, altering my state of consciousness gives me the the light feeling I need whilst dealing with these problems. When you're dealing with sick children, or you're dealing with people around you dying, or you're dealing with battling to pay the bills, as we do every single month, you can easily get very stressed, and I'd get even more stressed if I was constantly just inside of my body. That said, I did need to come back to my body to look after it a little these last weeks, and I've had to slow down. Certainly I haven't slowed down on my union with God, but I've had to slow down on certain consciousness altering practices that I would do, so I can get into my body, I can feel my body and hear what it needs and what's going on. At the same time, I still receive guidance to heal my own body via dreams, etc., which I get often from God or Spirit, or however you want to call it, by altering my consciousness. So here is the problem I see, is if I was a practicing Christian and I knew nothing of the Vedas, or I knew nothing of the Dharmas, I would know nothing about altering my state of consciousness unless I followed the literal worded teachings, which not many human beings do manage to follow. A great deal of Christians do not fast. The Bible strictly tells you when you fast. It doesn't ask you if you're going to, it says when. But most Christians never do, so they don't alter their state of consciousness. Now, here's the thing. If you alter your state of consciousness and then read the Bible, you can actually perceive it in a different way. Because your state of consciousness alters the way you perceive the things you're looking at, be it your reality, be it a scripture or a text. And the writers of the Bible knew this. They were men of God, and men of God must alter their state of consciousness because they must fast. They must practice these things to align and commune with God. They must, just as Jesus altered his state of consciousness to align with God. At night he would go and fast, and he would meditate alone. He would alter his state of being, his state of consciousness. He was not sitting on a hill just saying, hey God. He was getting deep into himself to hear the intuitive body that creates a union with God. Now, the higher you can raise your level of consciousness, or let's say vibration, the easier it is for you to hear that which God has for you, because the more silent you become. And as I've said countless times, when the angles of light, the natural angles of light, not the ones created for you by the mainstream media, travel into your body, and they carry the photons which have messages in them. Ultimately, photons are particles of light that carry a message on an angle of light, come into your body. They stimulate your pineal, you receive your message. Angels are messengers of light, just a much more romantic way of putting it than a photon, but they are one in the same. Science has proven the existence of angels. Now, here's the problem. If everybody is always in the first level of consciousness. Now, in modern science, you have beta, alpha, theta, delta, brain cycles. They can translate to your level of consciousness. So if you're in beta and you read the Bible, you will only see it through the perception of beta eyes, of the bottom level of consciousness. You will see it via that perception. Not a bad thing, but you will not see it on the next level, alpha, until you alter your state of consciousness. Now, if you are not a disciplined Christian, and you do not fast, and you do not do as Jesus told you to do, then you are not going to be able to see the next depths of the Bible. And thus, as Jesus told you, he speaks in parable for a reason. There are allegories, and it says some things are allegories in the Bible. It physically says that. And if you don't pause and ask yourself, what is this allegorical meaning? What is this parabolic meaning? What is this story that makes no sense inside the reality that I live in? And meditate on it and get deep within it and fast, etc., to understand it. Then you're not going to raise up to the next level of consciousness, and you're not going to be able to perceive the next layer of the Bible. The next layer being the alpha state. Now, inside the Bible, there's a code from Greek mysticism, which is a documented language and way of representing this, of the stages of human consciousness. And the first stage in Greek mysticism is earth. The second stage is water. The third is air. The fourth is fire. Earth, water, air, fire. And then the final product is quintessence, or the new mind. nirvana, enlightenment, union and oneness with the Creator. In the Bible, this code exists because those who obey the teachings can eventually see the code. Those who obey them will eventually see it. Not all, because not all need to. Some people are perfectly able to serve God and live a life where they put the human virtues above all else without needing to know that. But most are not doing that. Most are hungering God, but they are told, love thy neighbour. It's impossible to instruct somebody to love, but you can create the best state in your human vehicle to be able to love. If you are constantly battered by the thoughts of your own mind, it's very difficult to love other people as well as you can. If you are in a state of peace and silence and unity and oneness with God's creation, it's much easier to start loving other people. And if you command a human being, love that person, you know yourself, you can't command love. Love is an involuntary happening that arises from within us. And thus, the best thing to do is to make the body in the best state to accept the love. Or to channel the love, perhaps, would be the best way to put it. So, if we look at, as I say, earth is the bottom level, which is beta. And then you have water, which is alpha. And then you have air, which is theta. Then you have fire, which is delta. Then you have enlightenment, nirvana, or however. Now, this is why we have major problems in modern religion of Christianity, is you can go all around the planet and Christianity exists in every town, village, and city, pretty much. Yet we still have a lot of broken human beings in these places. The neighbour's generator. So, as you go around, we still have many broken persons, we still have a lot of suffering, and we still have a lot of Christians who are not living the way Jesus asked them to live. They just visit church on a weekend and leave it at that. This is a religion based around a person. This is not the religion Jesus Christ followed. Jesus Christ was alone walking in the wilderness, he was praying alone at night, he was fasting. Jesus Christ was finding altered states of consciousness as a man to be able to commune with God, with his Father. Now, if we look at these levels, and as I've said before, you look at baptism, it makes a lot more sense. You can get the Pope, and I can go and get you a drug addict. And if you baptize him the Pope's way, chances are he'll still be a drug addict in the next coming weeks. You can baptize him every day. You can keep dunking his head in that water every day for 6 months. If you don't work on altering this state here, he will always be the drug addict. He'll just have a wet head. And the Pope himself can do it, and every bishop and cardinal on the planet can take their turn. If you give that man to me and I baptize him, from the perception of reading the Bible from the next state of consciousness, alpha, from the water stage of consciousness as it is in Greek mysticism, I would take that man and I would teach him how to alter his state of consciousness to come out of the repetitive thinking and the thought cycles that are making him grab the drugs and the habit, and I would raise him up to alpha, raise him up to water, and I would say, okay, now you get a break from that, and in this altered state of consciousness you get an opportunity to rewire your beta state of consciousness, to rewire your ego, your carnal mind, to say no to those drugs. And the only chance the drug addict has through baptism is the secondary way of baptizing. But the only way to understand that way of baptism is to alter your state of consciousness to perceive the Bible in that way. Now, many literal Christians argue with me blue in the face. They do not want me to perceive the Bible from a mystical sense. They say it's New Age. They say, and it's not in the least bit New Age. It's just I did what Jesus told me to do. I fasted. I did 40 days and 40 nights. I've done much more than that, in fact. I came and surrendered my life into God's hands with absolute faith. I made myself broke. I went to another country in the name of God to serve others. So I have some space, I say as humbly as I can, to speak on the teachings of Jesus in that way because I followed them. I did as he asked. I didn't sit at home reading a book and getting irate at people from my armchair. I, in faith, went. And if we can't see many other Christians, there are others out there, and literal Christians as well, who find the faith within them. But if the majority are at home in their armchair, and they are not finding the faith to get out there and to serve with the passion that Jesus Christ tried to give you the tools within, try to give you the tools to conjure from within, then there's a problem with the religion because we don't speak about consciousness. If we speak about consciousness with inside Christianity, people don't understand it. But the altered state of consciousness is there for those to see it. And the parable is there, it is said, it is there. There's a reason it's spoken in parable, because those who are disciplined and do as was asked then have the secrets revealed unto them. However, as I've said, if you're a literal Christian and you know nothing of mysticism and you are able to live a life of charity to others, as some of my friends can, you don't need to listen to me. You don't need to hear what I've got to say. But if you are like I, and you're out in the world now, and you're looking for God, and you've been fasting, and the Bible makes no sense to you at all, because when you read it, it doesn't do anything for you. It becomes just a story of people walking around in a desert thousands of years ago that has no impact on your life today. Then you're the sort of person like me, with the same spiritual and mental constitution, who needs to be able to alter their consciousness to perceive the next layer of the Bible, which is the mystical layer. I would never tell a literalist that it's purely mystical and that they have read it wrong. And I expect the same courtesy. But often I don't find that. And literalists will argue that I'm wrong. But the problem is, I know not to debate them because they are in beta. And I have perceived it from alpha. So unless I can convince them to move up to alpha, then they won't perceive it in the same way that I have perceived it. And if Jesus himself couldn't convince them to undertake fasting and couldn't convince them to, and even though they claim to serve him, then what chance have I got of having them alter their state of consciousness to be able to perceive these things from the mystic standpoint? So, when you understand the levels of consciousness, and you understand that the reason they're not spoken of is because the Christianity of today is all done from the earth level, from beta. All of it. Pretty much all is done from beta. I see the odd new Christian church coming about where they are very open. I saw a guy who was giving a talk and a feather came down. You all know this children's village is called Feather's Tale because I get feathers from heaven all the time, as it says in Psalms. This is why we have the logo of the child blowing the feather. Constant sign from God are these feathers, and my numerical guidance as well that I receive in dreams and all the other stuff. But predominantly Christianity is from the beta, the earth cycle. But if you understand it, then you can start realizing some very interesting things. If you first of all work on altering your consciousness, and let thy eye be single, so your whole body can fill with light. And what a profound saying that is from Jesus. Or you can meet God face to face in the place they call pineal. You know, the pineal accepts those angles of light and those photons to give you messages from God, from divine sources, from corners of reality you can't even begin to imagine or to dream about. And the light is coming to me right now from there, from all over the place. So who knows what photon will go into me and give me the right idea or the right awakening unto a subject. But if you can start doing that, or if you're not doing that and you're stuck in beta, then that's fine so long as you can live your life in line with how Jesus asked you to live it. But if you struggle, if you're reading the Bible and you're a literalist and you're saying something's missing, it's telling me to be this, it's telling me not to sin, but I can't control my body. I can't get my body to stop sinning. Then you need to alter your consciousness and you need to understand these codes. Because they are the solution to the problems. If a person is moving up into alpha and theta, you can nearly, if you give them the correct moral guidance, which the literal Bible provides via Jesus' teachings, you can't get them to sin. They don't want to, as sin would be perceived. They don't want to be immoral because they just feel so satisfied with who they are and what they are. And once they hear direct union with God and instruction from God, and you know God is there, They don't want to turn away, and they don't want to go into the life of empty materiality and impermanence. You know, everybody feels duped if they are to worship something temporal and temporary like sex. This is why we try to reach out to God, because we want to worship. Worship's too bad a word. We want to commune and focus our lives upon something permanent, something eternal, as is the love of God. So when you understand that you have these levels of consciousness, earth, air, water, fire, beta, alpha, theta, delta, and you begin to read the Bible from an altered state of consciousness, only from an altered state of consciousness can you do it. If you're going to go at it from beta without doing the practice, then it's like your flat pack furniture remains flat pack, because you're reading the instructions from beta but you're not acting on it. And inside those instructions are things that alter your state of consciousness. So if you read the instructions and then practice them, if you read them and then go and do a long fast and then read it again, you'll start to get whispers of the mystical. You'll start to get the altered perception from your altered consciousness, and you'll start to build your flat pack furniture. But if you just read the instructions over and over again and never pick up the tools, which is what many people in beta perceiving the Bible are doing, that's why they're sat at home in armchairs instead of getting out in the world and helping the innocent who need them, or they are too busy chasing whatever it is that they're chasing, or too busy in massive turmoil because they think they're a horrible sinner and they don't know how to stop being a horrible sinner, when the person sitting next to them in church has got exactly the same shit going on inside his head as well. But if you teach them to raise up out of that level of consciousness where they are trapped within, you can find all the discipline you require, because you can find all of the guidance you require and all of the unity you require with God and his existence. And if you read the Bible, it begins then to make sense from the mystical standpoint. When somebody comes and baptizes you with water, you get a wet head. You then live a life in service of Christ, as it said. But this is not what Jesus did. Jesus lived a life in line with what I'm describing, altering states of consciousness. This is why I said in a recent video, the New Age stuff that's being touted as New Age, that's not New Age, is actually simply the workings of the human, some of it, not all, the workings of the human vehicle to commune with God. So you go from earth to water, so that's baptism out the way. You understand then when someone is washing someone's feet with tears. You know, the Pope doesn't need to go out and wash someone's feet. The Pope needs to internally baptize them, raise them up to Alpha. You understand then how Jesus is going to save you in the air. You then understand how it is that you're going to be baptized with fire. You then understand how it is that whilst they go around the walls of Jericho 7 times and they find a union with what are called the chakras, the 7 wheels, the 7 energy centers of the human body, that the walls come down on the 7th day and the city is raised to fire, because finally you find dominion over your energies in your body, be it through meditation practice or be it just naturally. Some people do it naturally and they're fine, but others can't. So through meditation practice you raise up, and the fire represents you ascending into the higher realms of consciousness, so as you can be baptized with fire, so you can meet Christ in the air and you can attune to the Christ consciousness. And this is why we must alter our states of consciousness if we are a Christian, because if we do not, we always read the Bible on the earth level, never the water level, and we miss the next layer. And there's even a further layer, but I'm not going to get into that. But I see the layers working in coincidence with your state of consciousness. And 95% of Christians don't even know that they need to alter their state of consciousness. The other 5% might have fasted and realised that it does alter your state of consciousness. It doesn't necessarily mean it has to be part of their daily practice to be a Christian, but I am just tired now of seeing weak, not their fault, I have empathy, but weak pastors and preachers who are sexually immoral or stealing money. And they're supposed to be a representative of God. And they are like that because they are thrown into the lion's den, into this conceited load of nonsense where they say, right, you are now a servant of God and you will teach people what is right and what is wrong. All the while, constantly stuck inside the part of the body that is the weakest state of mental being, which is the state where you can be tempted and lured into all these things that we label as sin, or basically the lower nature of a human being and a human journey. And if they were only taught to alter their states of consciousness, like a Buddhist monk is, or like the Coptic Christian monks do, who spend most of their days repeating a mantra over and over again. They say, Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner. All day, every day. And it alters their state of consciousness, and then they go silent and they find a union with God. But instead, they are really stuck in beta. And these poor men and poor women just fall victim time and time again to the temptations of their lower self. And the longer they carry on trying to forcefully feel like the things they're doing are wrong, for all they keep doing the things over and over again, stealing and sexual immorality, the more fake it all becomes, because they're not doing it naturally. They're not doing it naturally because they're reading a book and saying that's how a good person's supposed to be, so they're forcing themselves to do it, never realizing that if they were to just fast and take a sidestep from the beta cycle of the brain, that their body would furnish them with an inner working that allows for them to do those things with ease and without force. Because, as I say, you can't love through force. And this is why the Bible is also a guru in its own self, what is left of it after the Romans pulled it apart as they have. But it's a guru, because it leaves you asking correct questions only if you move into the mystic consciousness. For instance, God commands that you must love him above all else. You can't be commanded to love. You can't command me to love something. It doesn't work. Love doesn't work that way. So it makes you, after a while, pause and say, why would God do that? Why would God command me to love him when he knows that love is not something that can be commanded? And when you start looking at things that way, the book in itself becomes a guru and a teacher. But when you look at it from the beta level and you just keep preaching about men who walked in the desert thousands of years ago, and you don't translate it to how it helps people today, then you do a huge disservice to the whole of humanity. And this is the slow progression, because Christianity in the Bible is in every community in the world now. Now we just need to alter our consciousness so we can alter our perception of it, so as we can make it work for us. Or we can do the same with Islam, because the same goes for Islam, as I've shown in other videos. The same mystic codes are in every religion. Once you understand the mystic codes, you understand the religion that these men followed was finding union with God within themselves. And thus we must do the same. I think I've said all I want to. God bless, guys.